So, and then just to reiterate, if people don't know me, I'm Marnie Smith. I'm the Assistant Director of Graduate Career Services at the Marxe School at Baruch College. I know we have a mix of graduate students from all the schools today. And we are so lucky to have Lindsay be with us, who's a Marxe alum and Baruch alum. And really, I'm going to let her introduce herself and let's dive in. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Lindsay.
Yeah, thank you, Marnie. Hi, everyone. Great to be here. Happy to help you all navigate this issue of stress management that we're all facing right now. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can take a look at some slides. So you should all be able to see my slides now. Marnie, is that
Yes.
looking good? Okay, great. All right. So yeah, as Marnie said, I am a Marxe alum, a Baruch alum, actually. I attended Baruch for both my undergraduate degree and my master's degree. So really excited to be here to help all of you out in this way. And I hope that the information that's shared here is really valuable for you as you kind of navigate not only your job searches and your whatever work stress you're experiencing, but also to kind of help you manage stress better, I think, in daily life. That's really the goal here. So the topic of stress management is near and dear to me. This is something that I've personally struggled with. I continue to work on it every day, so I understand how challenging it can be to kind of like work these techniques into your daily life. And like, as I said, more than ever right now, this is super important with the pandemic and with all of the implications that the pandemic is having on our work lives, our job searches, our family life, and our home life, and kind of working remote and doing all of this in our home spaces. So it's especially important right now that we kind of like take the time to really take a step back, think about kind of how we can, manage stress better so that it doesn't take that toll on our bodies and minds that it often does. So my goal for all of you today is to kind of have you walk away with a really solid understanding of several different habits that you can kind of develop to make stress management part of your daily life, and also to give you some examples of specific techniques that you could start using right away. I'm going to give you kind of a preview of some of my favorite techniques, and then after the workshop is over, we'll be sending around some materials that you can reference, which will have even more information in them. So as Marnie said, Marnie kind of gave a quick introduction of me, but I thought I'd spend just a minute or two kind of giving you a little bit of background about me and kind of how I came here. So again, my name is Lindsay Collins. I'm a health coach. I'm based in New York City. I studied holistic health, functional medicine, and nutrition coaching at the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. And then previously, as I mentioned, I was a Baruch alum. I have a BA in economics from 2008, and then I also was a Marxe alum, right? Got my MPA in 2010. And I've spent, kind of the last 4+ years, really kind of like navigating the world of health and wellness and healing from a lot of my own chronic health issues, including, as I mentioned, chronic stress. And so I'm hoping to kind of be able to bring to bear a lot of that experience that I've had and the experience that I've kind of honed through my coaching to be able to kind of help you all do that as well. And then kind of in parallel to, my coaching experience, I've spent the past 10+ years really working in strategic planning and also in business research at a couple different institutions. Currently, I work in enterprise strategy at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. So this is kind of a dual career that I have going on right now, where I'm working kind of like continuing my work in strategy and then also kind of working on coaching to kind of, help people in this way as well. And I find that there are actually a lot of parallels between the work that I've done in strategy and the work that I'm doing in health coaching, which is something that I didn't quite see at first, but now I kind of actually do see a lot of parallels in like the skills and the experience that I've built up in both areas. So I think, my example of kind of how I've done this is actually probably a good one of kind of thinking about ways that you can kind of marry the experience that you have in different fields and kind of channel that into new and different career opportunities that give you a little bit more of a sense of purpose outside of maybe what you're doing day to day as well. And then, kind of finally, I would say, as I just mentioned, my approach is really going to kind of blend the strategic planning expertise that I have with this passion for health and wellness. And my goal, my approach really when I work with clients, and I'm going to bring that here today to help all of you, is to really kind of help people get organized and thinking about like what's their personal health strategy, thinking about kind of like your vision for where you want to go with your health, and setting really clear but realistic goals, and kind of really kind of having a focus on setting quality goals that you can actually kind of achieve and make sure that you have the support to achieve them. So as I mentioned kind of today, my goal for you is to help you kind of walk away with those habits and techniques and a little bit of a plan for you to be able to start implementing them. All right, so before we get started with the workshop, we wanted to kind of take a step back and just understand like what brought you all here today. So we're going to do a quick poll, and Marnie, I think, is going to go ahead and set that up. So we're interested in knowing, why are you attending today's workshop? So we'll give everyone a couple seconds to just kind of make your selection here, and then we'll take a look at the results. Okay, almost there. Great. All right. Looks like we have all of the results in, and there's a pretty clear winner, I think, which is, the primary reason people seem to be interested in today's workshop is that they are experiencing stress in their job search, which makes sense. That's the title of today's workshop. So we're definitely going to talk about, lots of ways that you can kind of help to manage stress in your job search. A couple other areas that popped up here is just kind of managing stress in daily life. That was about half of people responded that was their primary reason. And then stress in your current job. So, and pandemic-related stress, I think, is probably a given for everyone. But so this is great to get a handle on kind of, what your kind of core issues around stress management are. So really helpful to see this. So thank you all for taking the time to do the poll. So then let's jump right in, shall we? So what you'll achieve today. So as I've alluded to this a little bit, but just to get a little bit more specific, there's going to be two pieces to what we're going to do today. So the first is to learn about stress management, techniques and habits, and most importantly, how to use them successfully. So this is where the habits really come in. So I'm going to talk, in detail about different kind of habits that you can build up that support your stress management goals within your daily life. And so we'll talk through several of those. And then the second piece, as I mentioned, to kind of make this workshop actionable for you and to help you actually take what you learned and start applying it, right away in your daily life. We're going to work on creating a short and simple self-care plan so you can use these techniques. So we're going to kind of think about, just a few little thought exercises to kind of get those juices flowing and get a little bit of a plan of action in place for you when you end today's workshop. All right. So we're going to kick things off with a quick little thought exercise. So as I mentioned before, I'm going to be channeling my strategic planning expertise here. So this is the first piece of that. So we're going to talk a little bit about your self-care vision. And so when we think about the vision, this is really kind of an aspirational idea of kind of where you want to go with your health, and in this case, where you want to go with stress management, what you want to achieve there. So before we get into specific habits or techniques and kind of start thinking about how to resolve the stress management issues, I want to ask you all to kind of take a step back and forget about all of the stress that you're currently experiencing, right? Forget about the limitations, forget about the obligations that we all have, and we're going to start with a blank slate. So the question that I would like you all to think about and answer is, what are 2 to 3 words that describe how you want to feel every day? So this doesn't have to be a fancy sentence or anything, just jot down 2 or 3 words that come to mind for kind of how you ideally want to feel every day. So we're going to spend about a minute thinking about this independently. And then we're going to come back together, and then I'm going to ask a few people to maybe share some of their responses to give everyone a little bit of inspiration before we get started thinking about some stress management habits and techniques. So I'm going to go ahead and set a little timer for 1 minute here. Can you all see the timer?
Yes.
There you go. Okay, great. All right, so we'll take another minute to jot down our responses.
Okay, great. And this is Marnie, and just so everybody knows, everybody has the power to unmute themselves. So if you want to participate, we'd love to have you unmute yourself and tell us your words. I also want to remind everyone, this is a very low stakes environment. We're not being graded on our answers. We're not being judged here. We're just here to come together and de-stress and learn from Lindsay.
Great, thanks, Marnie. Definitely agree.
This is a very peaceful countdown.
I know, right? It's in keeping with our theme. All right, so we've had about a minute or so to think about our 2 to 3 words. So I'm actually going to kick this off to break the ice a little bit. So I'm going to share my 3 words about how I want to feel every day, and then I'll open it up to anyone else who would like to share. So my 3 words are grounded, flexible, and energized. So I'm going to open it on up and see if anyone would like to jump in and share their words.
I can share mine.
Great, thank you.
Hi, my name is Joanna, and I have 3 words, and they are organized, motivated, and focused. I wrote not distracted, but I can do focused.
Wonderful. Those are great words to aspire to. I think we can all relate to that. Thank you, Joanna. Anyone else would like to share?
I don't mind sharing.
Great.
I had 2 words that popped out for me, centered and productive.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jen.
Hi, I'm going to share. It's Nicole. My 3 words that popped immediately were thankful, encouraged, and focus.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nicole. So I'm seeing focused is becoming a theme here. Would anyone else like to share?
I do see Lindsay McCormick put in the chat.
Okay.
My words were energy and even keel.
Wonderful. Yes, definitely all striving to be even keeled. Wonderful. All right, maybe we have time for one more, and then we can go ahead and jump in.
Oh, okay. We've got a few people who wanted to put in the chat.
Wonderful.
Tracy said, hi, everyone. My words are achieved and complete. Jean Jacob says peaceful, relaxed, and productive. And Sandra said empowered and peaceful. And Jessica said fulfilled, happy, and motivated.
Wonderful. I love these words. You guys are doing great at this. So definitely sensing some themes here. I think we all want to obviously feel more centered, more balanced, more calm, right? So we want to kind of have that vibe going. And then I think, like, in keeping with the theme of this workshop around, job searches, we want to be motivated, we want to be focused, we want to feel productive. So these are all great words to aspire to, great visions for how you want to handle your self-care. So this was wonderful. Thank you all for taking the time to do this. And you can kind of keep these visions that we've put together here in mind as we go through the rest of the workshop. And then kind of as we talk, after we finish kind of talking about some of the specific habits or techniques you can use, we're going to kind of come back together. We're going to bring that vision back in, and we're going to use that to help us come up with a really simple plan for how we can start to kind of prioritize stress management more throughout our day. Wonderful. Okay. So let's jump into how we can manage stress, right? So this is the $1 million question that we all want to figure out how to answer, right? So I'm going to talk through 5 habits, kind of high level habits that are really going to kind of help us develop kind of like, the right mindset and approaches to developing stress management. I'm going to talk a little bit about specific techniques as I go through these habits, and then I'll share some really tangible techniques we can use after this as well. So the first one I'm going to jump into is focus on what you can control. So this piece of this habit is really about shifting your mindset, right? So this is all about kind of shifting your mindset away from what we really don't have control over, which is things like, for example, when you're going to hear back from that job application, or when the pandemic's going to end, things like that, things of that nature, focusing away from dwelling a lot on those pieces of those factors that we're focused on, and focusing more on the things that we do have control over, what's within the span of our control. So a really great example of this is self-care. So that includes, nutrition, the food that we're eating, rest, the sleep that we're getting, when we take breaks, things like that, and movement, exercise. So these are things that we have so much more control over, and that can also help us to manage stress, not just doing these activities, but also kind of shifting the focus away from things that are no longer within our control. Kind of, you have control over submitting the application, but once it's out, you have to kind of be able to shift back and kind of focus on what's within your span of control. A really great way of doing this is using meditation as a tool for shifting your mindset. So the idea behind meditation is that it really helps us to become a witness to our thoughts rather than being controlled by our thoughts. And so meditation has become pretty trendy, and it's, something that's still pretty new to many people, but it's something that we really can kind of have in our toolbox, our stress management toolbox, and pull on, especially as it relates to kind of shifting our mindset, calming our thoughts, kind of taming that racing mind that we all experience, right? So this is a big one, and I think this is kind of the first one that I'm calling out, because I think that shifting that mindset and being able to kind of become aware of that mindset is a huge piece of kind of where we want to go with stress management. And it's something that once we've achieved that shift in mindset, we can build on that by doing more active, tangible things to manage our stress. So focus on what you can control. That's the first piece. So the second thing that I'm going to call out is set boundaries and manage your time. So, when we think about working from home, especially, right? Work-life balance becomes a major issue. I mean, this can be an issue all the time. And when I say work, I don't just mean work, working for an employer, but I mean also kind of whatever work it is you might be doing, whether that's your schoolwork, or maybe that's your job search, or maybe it's work at home, whatever it is you might be focusing on. But kind of having any type of work-life balance really requires boundaries, especially when you're working remotely and we're working in our homes, right? So days can bleed into nights. Before you know it, you're working and you have no idea like where the day started or ended. I think we've all been there. And so this is where managing expectations really comes in. So I understand that managing expectations at work with employers can be easier said than done, believe me. But I think this is something to really kind of take a step back and look at, is sort of how are we establishing those boundaries? Do we have those boundaries to begin with around when we work, how we work, when we're on call, and kind of when we begin the day, when we end the day, those types of boundaries. Do we have those boundaries? And then how do we communicate those to the people we work with? Maybe it's our colleagues or our managers, or people that we're in a study group with, or whatever it might be. And so this is about managing expectations with other people, but also with yourself. So kind of asking yourself, like, where could you use stronger boundaries between when you wake up in the morning and start work, finish work, and then wind down your day, and holding yourself accountable to those, right? So kind of making sure that you're setting them, but that you're also paying attention to them as you go throughout your day. So when we talk about boundaries and maintaining them, something that's really important there is going to be managing your time. And so this doesn't need to mean, that you're on a super tight, strict schedule, but it does mean adding a little bit of structure to your day. so that you kind of have a sense of where you can fit in those pieces of self-care that you would like to make a priority, right? And if we're saying that stress management is a priority, that means kind of, making sure that we're making time to take maybe, a walk in the middle of the day, or taking time to exercise, or taking time to meditate, whatever it is you decide to do to help manage that stress. That's something that you're going to kind of need to carve out time for. And in order to have those boundaries to be able to do those things, you're going to need to kind of structure your day, schedule those things into your day. So a great example of how to do this might be to set reminders. So maybe set reminders for yourself on your calendar to take a walk, or to stop for lunch, or to stop just to take a break in the middle of the day, have a cup of tea or something like that. Just whatever is relaxing for you to kind of build that into your day and your structure. So setting boundaries and managing your time, that's a big one. The third thing that I'm going to call out, the third habit is prioritizing rest. So this is something that I alluded to a little bit in the first habit that we talked about, focus on what you can control, as one of the types of self-care that you can prioritize. But rest is so important that I'm calling this out on its own, really, especially as it connects to stress management. So sleep and stress are interconnected, like they're very interwoven, and I think we all know this, based on the experiences that we've had in our lives. So if you have a day where you're super stressed out, your mind's running a million miles per hour, and you really can't kind of turn it off, it's really hard to wind down for sleep, right? So that can often affect our ability to fall asleep. It can affect our ability to stay asleep, which then creates this sort of like self-reinforcing cycle of continuing to go into your following day really stressed out, which impacts our energy, it impacts our focus, our motivation, our productivity, and that stress just continues to build and impact our sleep, and on it goes, right? So this idea of prioritizing rest is a super important one when we talk about stress management. So the first thing that I would point out when it comes to prioritizing rest is you want to budget time to prepare yourself for sleep, right? This is something that we often don't really think about. We, kind of figure we'll work until we're exhausted, we burn the midnight oil, right? And then we crash and we just go to sleep, right? But that's kind of when we get into that routine we fall into that rut of having our sleep, having our stress really affect our sleep, right? So we want to budget time to prepare our bodies and minds for sleep. So this means kind of having time to kind of instill those boundaries like we talked about before, right? So setting those boundaries to stop working by a certain time, maybe, to make sure that you then have time to maybe prepare a meal and maybe take a half hour, an hour or so to kind of wind down before sleep. It'll do a world of good for you as you're kind of preparing your body to rest. And the second piece of this, and this kind of is in keeping with budgeting time to prepare for sleep, is to create sleep rituals. So I love this idea of a ritual that you have. Maybe it's one or two things that you do to kind of signal to your mind and your body that it's time to rest. So this could be something like turning off technology, like 30 minutes to an hour before you go to sleep, kind of eliminating that screen time, which really kind of helps us to settle our mind. Reading is a great thing to do, right? So I think we all kind of have had those moments when reading a book, curling up with a book is really relaxing. And I think this kind of gets at the previous idea of turning off technology. So kind of shifting gears to focus on things that are going to kind of get our mind off of work, get our mind off of that job application, get our mind off of schoolwork, kind of shifting to a different, lighter topic maybe. Lighting a candle is something that can be super easy, right? Maybe it's something like taking a bath or taking a shower, whatever it is you want to do to wind down. There are millions of options, right, to think through, but just kind of creating those sleep rituals so that you can kind of work that into your schedule, your daily schedule, and signal to yourself that it's time to rest. And rest is really, really the antidote to stress, right? So prioritize rest. So the fourth thing I'm going to call out is listen to your body. So this is really about kind of recognizing stress when it crops up in our body, right? So we all have stress symptoms that are unique to us, right? So some of us might feel anxious, some of us might feel wired and, you know, tired but wired and we can't fall asleep. Some of us might get a headache, right? A stress-related headache. So there's so many symptoms that can crop up when stress starts to really overload our bodies. And those symptoms are caused by different triggers, right? So we all have different triggers. This could range from something related to, you know, a busy week at work, to maybe it's, you know, taking on too many personal commitments in addition to our work lives. So there's so many different triggers that could be affecting your body. So really listening to your body is about identifying those triggers, right? Moderating those triggers when you can. So we can't eliminate them always, but we can try to moderate them. And then recognizing the symptoms, right, that you're experiencing when those triggers crop up. And the symptoms are usually something that is very obvious, right? So you can't miss it. You know that you don't feel well. And it's really about listening to those symptoms come up. And when you hear those symptoms, taking a step back, prioritizing rest, because really listening to your body is about kind of listening to the cues that you're getting for when you need to pull back and take a break. And a great way to do this is to kind of experiment with different techniques as well. So kind of, you know, there's so many different stress management techniques that we can call on, but they're all going to work differently for everyone, right? And so they're, you know, the same thing that works for me may not be the best combination of techniques for someone else. So experimenting to find what really works for you is a great way to kind of get into this habit of stress management, right? So maybe picking one new technique every week that you can try, giving it a full week, kind of seeing how you feel at the end of the week. And if it works for you, keep it. If it doesn't work for you, maybe try to replace it with something different. So listening to your body. And I would say that if you do nothing else at the end of this workshop, my recommendation would be, you know, if you're going to pick one of these habits to focus on, it would be listening to your body first, because I think this is going to be a great way to start developing some of that self-awareness about how stress is impacting you, and what it's connected to, right? All right, and then finally, the fifth habit that I would call out, again, going back to that idea of having a vision and goals and kind of knowing where you want to go, is to get clear on your goals for stress management and ask for the support that you need in order to achieve those goals, right? So we want to set really specific, actionable, and achievable goals, especially when we're new to this, right? When we're just trying out stress management techniques, and we want to kind of see how they work for us. You know, we want to set specific goals. For example, going for a walk every day. Maybe we go for a 10-minute walk every day, or we try meditating for 5 minutes every morning. Or maybe it's something around, you know, the food, our relationship with food. Maybe it's stopping to take a break to eat lunch 3 times a week, or maybe times a week. So stuff that's very specific and achievable, things that you can do easily without making, you know, huge changes in your life. And then asking for the help and support to be able to actually make those changes, right? So maybe this is a little bit limited with the pandemic, obviously. Impacts our ability to kind of ask people for help in person. But maybe it's something like asking for more help around the house from your other members of your household. Maybe you feel like you're taking on, you know, maybe more housework than another person that's kind of interfering with your ability to manage your stress. Maybe it's asking someone to babysit when you normally wouldn't, and you would just kind of, you know, not make that a priority. Maybe it's pairing up with a family or a family member or a friend to exercise with them and kind of having them hold you accountable to that goal. That's a great way to kind of pair up with someone to kind of have like a buddy for going on walks or doing workouts and things like that. And then finally, I would say, kind of going back to this idea of managing expectations at work, delegating more at work, or kind of just setting those expectations is going to help you be able to achieve those goals, right? If you have an expectation that you're setting that every day, you know, you're starting work at 9 a.m. and not before that, except for maybe under special circumstances, you know, you'll be able to fit in potentially a meditation or a workout that morning. So there are lots of implications to whether or not we actually ask for the help and support we need, right? So that's a really important piece to think about, getting clear on goals and asking for support. So I'm going to pause here for a minute. I'm going to see if there are any questions from anyone before we move forward and talk about some specific stress management techniques that you can start using right away.
Hello. Hi, this is Hafsa. Thank you so much for all these great points and management tips. I have specific question regarding quick stress management tips, especially when giving a presentation before interview or an exam. I am not, I just have to give a prep talk or self-talk before I get into something big, but there's always a feeling of uncertainty and, lack of control over the situation.
Yes.
And if you can just give some tips. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm actually going to talk about some perfect techniques that you can use for that scenario in the next slide. So I'm gonna hold off. I'm gonna answer your question in just a minute when we get to that next slide. Does anyone have any other questions about maybe the habits that we talked about here before we move forward?
Hello.
Hi, Tracy.
Hi. So I really like the tips that you gave, but can you give a tip on how do you maintain accountability of the things that you do, to manage stress? Like, let's say, like me, I say I'm gonna do 30 minutes of exercise every day, and then I do it 3 days, and then I forget about it after that. Like, and then I feel bad about it. I feel like I'm not successful at what I set myself because I didn't continue.
Yeah, totally. So this is a struggle for everyone, right? Like I think this is finding the motivation and kind of keeping the motivation going is a huge piece of this. So thank you for that. So one thing that I really love to do when I try something new out, when I try any kind of technique or any kind of practice around self-care, is to kind of pay attention to how you're feeling after you do it, right? So if you work out, say you do you do some sort of exercise, or you go for a walk or whatever, and you've set a goal to do that 3 days a week or whatever your goal is, and you feel like you're falling short of it, a lot of times what helps is to pay attention to how you felt immediately after that exercise, or immediately after that walk, or maybe in the days following it, and kind of keep track of that. So keeping a little bit of a self-care journal, or in this case maybe a stress journal or something along those lines, might be really helpful. Because if you start to see the benefits and really recognize the benefits of it, so let's say that you have more energy, or you feel more calm, or you feel like your mind is more settled, or whatever it is you're achieving, maybe your sleep is better. It's really important to kind of pay attention to that. So that's kind of related to this listening to your body piece, right? So kind of seeing how different techniques can help you manage your stress. So I would suggest maybe trying to keep track of the benefits that you see from that. And then second of all, I would say, maybe setting reminders, setting calendar reminders, setting appointments with yourself essentially to do these things, right? So that can be really helpful to think about self-care and think about stress management techniques as sort of non-negotiable appointments, right? So if you know that managing stress is something that you need to get a handle on, we should kind of prioritize that the way that we prioritize maybe a meeting at work, or something that you've committed to doing to help a friend or a family member. So if you have a goal, for example, to take a walk in the morning or exercise in the morning, and you skip it that day, don't just forget about it, reschedule it. So put it later on in the day. Maybe you schedule for after work, or maybe you move it to the following day, but to kind of commit to doing that, a certain number of days per week, and then having the flexibility to move it around, but to kind of maintain that commitment that you made to yourself somehow. So is that helpful, Tracy? Does it sound like something that might be helpful for you?
Yeah, that sounds pretty good. I really like that of like taking, like, see how you feel right after it, and taking notes of that. I'm usually like, I'm home, working from home and with my baby, but I'm always like, on the rush and don't stop to think about that.
Yes.
So thank you.
Absolutely. Okay. any other questions I can answer? And we will have time for questions before we wrap up as well. So if you kind of think of questions along the way, feel free to jot them down, and then we can answer those questions at the end as well. Okay, great. All right, so let's jump into some specific techniques that you can start using. So these are really actionable, simple, fast techniques. So getting back to the question that was posed earlier before Tracy, there was a question about kind of how do I pull on maybe some really fast, easy techniques that I can use to prepare for maybe a meeting or a presentation or an interview or something like that, right? So the first technique that I want to call out, and these are kind of this is by no means an exhaustive list of stress management techniques, but these are 5 of my favorite techniques, ones that I use very often that I think are really fast and simple. You can do all of these in 5 minutes or less if you really wanted to, and for the most part, they're free. So these are 5 great examples, and I'll be sharing some additional ones as well after the workshop. But the one that I want to call out, which is great for preparing for a meeting, for a discussion, for an interview, whatever it might be, is deep breathing exercises. So you may have heard about these, right? So the idea behind deep breathing exercises is that when we intentionally and consciously breathe, it lowers our heart rate, which is something that's elevated when we're stressed, right? It helps to calm our mind and our thoughts because you're focusing on the breath rather than your thoughts, right? And it supports sleep because it calms your mind and lowers your heart rate, which in turn helps you to fall asleep. So there's lots of benefits to doing this, but it's a great exercise to do right before you head into any kind of situation where your nerves are up and you're feeling a bit stressed. It can really help to calm the nerves, center you, focus your mind on what it is you're trying to achieve. So a really simple exercise is to breathe in for 4 seconds, hold for 7 seconds, and then release for 8 seconds. And you can repeat this as many times as you want. It takes almost no time at all, right? You can do this in between, while you're working, you could do it at your desk, you could do it anywhere, literally anywhere. So this is something that I would definitely recommend for anyone who just needs a really quick, simple, fast, easy exercise that they want to be able to do to manage stress. And it makes a world of difference very quickly. So the second thing I would call out is something that I had mentioned in our previous slide when we talked about habits, and this is meditation. So again, this is kind of relatively new for a lot of people, but if it's something that you're kind of intrigued by and you'd like to try out, I highly recommend it. So this is something, again, that can be done really quickly. You only need 5-10 minutes at a time, and you can really notice a big difference from it. Meditation kind of calms the racing mind, right? So you become a witness to your thoughts rather than being controlled by them. And it also has physiological effects on our body, right? So it actually reduces the stress hormone called cortisol, which is something that becomes chronically elevated when we're stressed out all the time, and it has a lot of negative health consequences as a result. So meditation is a great tool and technique that we all have access to. Something you can do to get started with this really quickly is, there are lots of apps that you can download that have free versions. So you can kind of check, one of those out. Start with just 5 minutes a day. Maybe it's in the morning before you start your day. Maybe it's after work. I personally love to do meditation after work because I find that it's challenging for me to kind of calm my mind and separate, all the work I did from wanting to kind of like rest and relax at the end of the day. So it's a great way to wind down. The third technique I'd call out is movement. So this is really any exercise, any kind of movement or exercise that you would like to do. There are so many benefits to exercise. It relieves stress and anxiety. It boosts our mood. It improves our sleep, among a myriad of other benefits. So this can include anything from going for a walk to taking maybe a more intense HIIT class, if that's something that you're interested in, or just dancing, put on some music and dance for a couple minutes if that's something that you're interested in. So there are tons of options, and I would really encourage you to kind of make movement part of your day on a regular basis. Maybe it's a couple times a week, maybe it's every day for a 10-minute walk or something like that, but to really incorporate this, and it kind of has that added benefit of kind of getting you out of your mind and into your body, which is really great for stress management. The fourth one that I would call out, the fourth technique I call out is stretching. So stretching is obviously kind of an extension of this movement technique, but it does have some of its own unique benefits. So stretching is great for kind of promoting a feeling of groundedness. So if we feel like we're kind of in our head and we really just kind of can't get out of it, getting on the floor and doing some stretching can be very, very good for that, for promoting that groundedness. It also relieves stress-related muscle tension, which I think we've all experienced, right? Being on our computers all day. So that neck tension, those back pains, you know, we've all kind of experienced that. And so it's great for that. So there's a couple different ways you can do this. There's something called desk stretches. I don't know if any of you have heard of that, but it's something that you can Google. You'll find lots of videos or tutorials for how to do really quick desk stretches. So you don't even have to get up from your workspace. You can just take a quick, you know, couple minutes to do a little something. It can really kind of help to relieve some of that stress-related muscle tension. And then restorative yoga is a great option as well. So there are lots of different types of yoga that we can practice, but restorative yoga is one where you're doing really low impact moves. So you're holding them for longer periods of time, and it's really going to help to relieve that muscle tension, right? So this is something that you can look for. It's also called yin yoga, if you see that pop up somewhere. So that's a great option as well. And then the last thing that I would call out as one of my favorite stress management techniques is eating whole unprocessed foods. So I think a lot of people don't really think about the food we eat as impacting our stress and vice versa, but it is actually very much related. So stress has negative impacts on our body, right? It increases inflammation, it weakens our immunity, it zaps our energy. There are lots of different kind of impacts that it has. And eating foods eating certain foods, eating whole, unprocessed, you know, fresh foods, actually help to reverse some of those negative consequences. So they lower stress-related inflammation. They support sleep by kind of connecting to you know, our hormones, which are impacted by stress, and it also increases our energy and strengthens our immunity. So when I talk about whole unprocessed foods, I really mean, you know, fresh vegetables, fresh fruits, proteins like meats and fish, nuts and seeds, things like that. So that's really what you're going to want to kind of focus on, which I understand completely can be challenging when we're trying to kind of you know, manage a lot in our day. But to the extent that you can, you know, some of the ways that you can kind of help to make this more of a reality for yourself is by thinking about maybe meal prepping once a week, so carving out an hour or two, maybe on a Sunday, to prepare some food for the week. Or, you know, just making sure that when you're ordering food out, that you're kind of focusing on ordering from places that have these types of foods available, and not just reaching for packaged processed foods, because those are really going to, you know, kind of exacerbate a lot of the impacts of stress on our body. So as I mentioned, these are just few, you know, a sample of 5 stress management techniques that we can call on. I'm going to be sending around, I along with Marty will be sending around an infographic that you can take a look at after the workshop. So that will have an extensive list of different stress management techniques that you can pull from. I hope that will be helpful for you. All right, so with these in mind, I'm going to turn to our next piece of the workshop, which is putting together our simple self-care plan. So we're going to build off of what we just learned, right, about the habits that we talked about, the stress management techniques we talked about, and we're going to revisit the self-care vision that we put together earlier in the workshop. So those 2 to 3 words that you want to strive for, right? So we're going to put together a simple plan, and that question that I would like you all to think about is, what are 1 or 2 actions that you can start taking regularly to manage your stress? So a couple tips before you get started. You want to be specific and actionable. You want to go for realistic but sustainable actions. And you want to, again, think about that accountability piece. Think about the support you might need. How can you make sure that you're holding yourself accountable? Maybe you're partnering up with someone else to help hold each other accountable. Maybe you need to ask for help to kind of have someone you know, provide a bit more support in your day to be able to do these things. So a couple examples that I'm going to give you to just kind of think through before you jump in are maybe scheduling a 20-minute walk into your day 3 times a week, right? Or maybe you're meal prepping 2 days a week. So these are very specific, time-bound, actionable goals, right? That you can implement, and you'll be able to know whether or not you're achieving them, right? And then you'll kind of add on to this that piece about the accountability and support. So we're going to do this independently again. We're going to take about a minute or two. I'll give you guys about a minute to start with, and we'll check in and see how we're doing. And then we'll come back together and we'll share a couple of our self-care plans for some inspiration. Okay. All right, we have 1 minute on the clock. All right, so we've had about a minute to think about our self-care plan. Before we get started, I just want to acknowledge some of the suggestions that were put into the chat box, which I really appreciate. So some great ideas. Suzanne had mentioned the idea of accountability partners. So doing something like a 30-day challenge to make some of these actions or these techniques fun. So I love that idea, and I think that really relates back to this piece about accountability and support, right? So making sure that you have that when you're implementing your plan or your goals. And then some suggestions for different meditation apps or resources are in the chat. Headspace, a series at Netflix about Headspace, which I actually have noticed myself. I have to get to watching that. Mind Bliss is another resource for meditation. And then I would add to that an app called Calm. Calm is a great app. It's very user-friendly, and there are definitely a couple of really great free meditations there as well. So thank you to everyone for contributing those suggestions. All right, so let's see if we want to open it up and see if anyone has some self-care plans that they would like to share with the group.
I'll go.
Great, thanks, Melissa.
Hi, everyone. My name's Melissa. So Tracy brought up something that I've also struggled with, which is holding myself accountable for doing things that I set out to do during the week. I start it and then I don't, continue. So I think what your stress management tips sort of reminded me is that I have this go big or go home attitude, and I need to really just start in small increments and kind of build up. And so I invested in a stationary bike over the holidays, which I have not lived up to riding. I said every day for 30 minutes. And so I'm going to aim to do 15 minutes, 3 days a week on my lunch, what is technically my lunch break, even though I'm working from home. And I think that's it'll be a good just kind of break in between moving from one project to the next. So just instead of, I usually just kind of sit around that hour and browse on my phone, just get on the bike for 15 minutes and use that as just kind of like a time to just decompress a little bit before moving on to the next project.
Yes, I love that. Thank you, Melissa. I couldn't have said it better. I think that makes so much sense to start small, right? So you don't need to have these huge lofty goals where you're, becoming some sort of like Olympic athlete in between, on your lunch breaks. But, just picking 1 or 2 small things that you can start with, like you said, a couple minutes at a time, a few days a week, something that's really achievable. So that really gets to that achievable piece of, or the sustainable and realistic piece of these actions, right? So I think that's a great idea. And I think that the time you're choosing to do that, right, like in the middle of your day, is actually going to have that added benefit of probably giving you a little bit of a boost of energy, right, and kind of motivation. So I love the timing that you picked for trying that out. So thank you for sharing that. Would anyone else like to share their plan?
I just wanted to mention something that I started doing that I think, relates to a lot of the tips that were given here.
Yeah.
And especially to what you had mentioned before about having, like, if we're taking an action or something, like, and especially if it's supposed to be something that's supposed to be stress relief, to take a moment and really think about how we're feeling. And that's something I've been doing actually just recently. Whenever I get stressed in a situation, my action that I'm trying to sustain is to actually stop and be conscious about the fact that I'm stressed and try to understand where that stress comes from. So if the stress is like, oh my gosh, I want, I'm trying to apply for these jobs, and all of a sudden I feel really stressed and I feel like I can't, have a hand over the situation, I try to stop myself and think, okay, why are you getting stressed in this moment? Yes, you're applying for jobs, but what's the other layer? And that you feel like you're not good enough, so you feel like you don't have enough experience. You have imposter syndrome like coming up right now. And so I think, I've been really just conscious of just trying to understand those emotions as they're coming up. And then, of course, I think meditation has been helping. The deep breath exercises has been helping. But I also think that those were steps I had to take that I could only take once I started really trying to understand where my stress was coming from. So I think there's 2 layers there, and that's just something that I would suggest to anyone, that maybe break it down and really try to evaluate why that stress is coming up and talk yourself through the situation.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sandra. That was super helpful. And I think that kind of goes back to that habit of like listening to your body, right? Like, and not just listening to your body, but looking at the triggers and really kind of dissecting them a little bit and getting into like where they're coming from. So I totally agree that is a critical piece of this. And it's definitely something that, going back, if you take one of those habits and you really want to dive into it, it's that piece of kind of like looking at those symptoms, looking at those triggers, and really kind of understanding them. So I totally agree. Kind of said it better. Thank you. All right. Would anyone else like to share their plan? We have time for probably about 1 or 2 more.
Oh, Lindsay, this is Marnie. I do want to share a chat that Jen put in, something she already started doing. She said, I found starting the day off with drinking about 20 ounces, a 20-ounce glass of water, helps me with drinking enough water throughout the day, improves how I feel physically, and it starts me off on the right foot.
Yeah, definitely. No, I mean, hydration is a huge piece of that, a huge piece of feeling our best, right? And so it's not something I specifically called out here, but it's definitely something that is key. And I think that this is a good example of a small incremental goal, right, that you can set for yourself, starting with something that is relatively simple and straightforward, but can make a world of difference, right? And maybe this even serves as maybe like a little bit of a break throughout the day, right? To kind of go and refill your water bottle. So I think there are tons of benefits to doing something like this. So I totally agree that this could be, this is a huge like foundational piece. Like hydration is a huge foundational piece of our health as well. Great.
Hi, this is another Lindsay on the call.
Hi,
I really enjoyed this. I would say the one action item I'm taking away is scheduling time to go outside every day, because I know that's something that just really helps me in almost like a magical way when I'm kind of wound up. But especially with work, people schedule meetings and before you know it, you're like kind of boxed in and you're like, well, I guess I didn't get to go out today. And it just happens constantly. So scheduling that, putting it on the calendar and not letting anyone mess with it is going to be my takeaway.
That's awesome. I I definitely support that. I do that myself. I'm a big fan of scheduling my lunch and walking breaks into my workday, and kind of like claiming that time for yourself, right? Like obviously it's not always possible. Sometimes you have to kind of be flexible and stick to some work commitments, but it's a great kind of baseline to start from. Maybe kind of scheduling in 30 minutes every day, or maybe it's an hour every day throughout your work week, and just kind of considering that to be an appointment that you have with yourself. So I love that. Thanks, Lindsay.
Hello, I would also like to share just
Yes.
few things, more like two things.
Mhm.
I'm behind on confession that I'm behind of a lot of stuff and I need to improve. Something that I do is take a nap before 3 o'clock. That's something I've been doing.
Mhm.
Even though that's 15 minutes, and I think so that nap really refreshes me for the day because we're not walking or interacting too much. I think so we're losing a lot of energy staying by ourselves. And I think a lot about work and what's ahead, and the assignment, what I have to do. So I have started to get on to my assignment and start doing the work. That has helped me think less about my work and helps me um, create this feeling that I have more control over things that I have to do.
Mhm. Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Elsa. So yeah, I love the idea of taking a little nap, and kind of, as you mentioned, kind of just diving in and kind of getting started with work rather than kind of spending time thinking about it, right? So definitely can be helpful actions for anyone to take. So thank you for sharing. All right, so we have a couple minutes left. As I mentioned, we have time for a few last questions. I'm happy to answer questions and go back to any of the slides if anybody wants to take another look at something. If we run out of time, feel free to type your questions in the chat box, or you can kind of reach out to me afterwards with questions that you might have about any of the information that I shared today. But I'm gonna take a pause for another couple minutes and just see if there are any last questions that we want to talk through.
I have a question. I was just wondering if you have any advice on this. One of the things that I've been struggling with throughout the pandemic is sort of, I don't want to use the word dumbing down, but it's the only word I can think of right now, but sort of dumbing down my goals, because I feel like there's such like I feel like I'm dealing with a higher level of uncertainty because of the pandemic, and I'm struggling to sort of be a little bit more realistic with my goals given sort of everything that's going on right now. And I'm wondering if you have any tips or advice on dealing with sort of managing your goals and expectations for the year ahead given the level of uncertainty.
Yeah, so Melissa, are you referring to career goals?
Yeah, career goals.
Okay. Yeah, so I think this is something we're all struggling with. I think we all have, had to kind of moderate our expectations. It's very tough to deal with the level of uncertainty that we have going on right now. And it's impacting not just our work lives and our careers, but also our personal lives, right? Weddings get canceled, et cetera. So lots of stuff going on. I think that what I found really helpful as I kind of think about how to deal with this over the course of the pandemic is if I have a goal, if you have a goal that's kind of longer term in nature, it can help to kind of break that goal down into pieces, right? So think about, so let's say that you have a goal to kind of, take a career shift and find a new job or pursue training or something like that. Most of the time you can break that goal down into pieces, right? You can break it down into smaller, more manageable chunks. And so that's something that can be really helpful because then you can find kind of where you can make incremental progress. And oftentimes there are lots of things you can do to kind of take steps towards that goal without it necessarily achieving the ultimate end goal of it. That might take a little bit longer to get to, but I think breaking the goal down into pieces and thinking, okay, what steps can I take right now to kind of work my way toward it? And maybe it's taking a different approach than you originally kind of like thought you might need to take, but I think that can ultimately be really helpful to kind of break them down into pieces. Hope that's helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah, All right. So I think we're out of time. So again, if anyone has any additional questions, feel free to reach out to Marnie or to myself directly. If you'd like to connect with me directly, you can visit my website, you can email me, you can follow me on Instagram. I'd love to connect with all of you and kind of hear about how all of these stress management techniques are working for you. I'd love your feedback and I'd love to hear some success stories, as well as I'm happy to help out if you're running into any roadblocks or challenges. So thank you all. I hope this was helpful. Again, feel free to reach out and hope to connect with you all soon.
Thank you, Lindsay. We really appreciate you being with us today and giving us all of these great tips and tricks. And as Lindsay said, I will be sending everyone a follow-up email with materials and her contact information. So if you can't grab it now, I will be sending it later. But thank you, Lindsay. We really needed this.
Great. No, I'm happy. I'm happy to help out. I hope it's valuable for everyone. Yeah.
It is. And I see lots of thanks in the chat as well.
Thank you all.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yes, everybody stay safe, stay well, take care of yourself, okay? We hope you have a great day.
Thank you, Marnie.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye.